Good morning and welcome to UCA Sunday Service. My name is Hugh Wynn, member of the Board of Trustees. Like many of you, I came to this church for a sense of community. And I'm sure, like me, you found out that UCA is about more than just that. One of those things is a commitment to a beloved community, which is actually our theme for this month. UCA is committed to fostering an all-inclusive spirit within our walls and within the larger community. I look forward to hearing from Reverend Amanda and others during this month as we explore the topic of beloved community. After this morning's services, please join us for coffee hour. You'll find a link for that in the email you received this morning, as well as the connections email you got earlier this week. The connections email also has information for other events that UCA is hosting over this next week. So with that, whoever you are, whoever you have been, and whoever you are becoming, know that you are welcome here.
Our call to worship this morning comes from the Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf. This is a congregation that gathers in faith. Not faith in one religion or one God or any one way. We gather in faith of the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of a world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and those around us. Not a faith that requires perfection or rightness in one another. Rather, a faith that in our shared imperfection, we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that we may help one another to rise and to try again and again. We are Unitarian Universalists. Each week, we light our flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith. I like to think of the fact that Unitarian Universalists all over the country and all over the world from their homes, just like you and I, are also sitting down this Sunday morning to light their chalice and worship together. The words for our chalice lighting come from Jean Wallstrom. In this small flame dwells the beacon light of lanterns guiding travelers home. The warmth of hearth fires tended through the generations, the transforming energy of furnaces and the power and life of our sun. May these blessings, warmth and light and life-giving energy, be kindled in each of us.
A long time ago, before there were people on Earth, there were many different animals that lived all over. Some of the animals lived in the grasslands, but they didn't live too close to each other because they thought it was the best way. Now, one such animal was the hyena. Now, one day he decided he needed a new home, and so he found the perfect place. It was far away from all the other animals, near sweet water and protected by the shade of trees. The hyena wanted the best home possible, so everyone who could see it would know how important he was in the grasslands. So he had the best builder in the land build it and decorate it for him. It took a whole moon's time to build, and when it was done, Hyena threw a party to show it off. He hired the best chef in the land to cook the food, and there was so much that it took a week to cook it all. Hyena invited everybody to his party, and everyone came and greatly admired his fine new home and the delicious feast. Everyone, that is, except Hare. Now, this made Hyena mad. The next morning, he decided to pay a visit to Hare. "Why did you not come to my party last night and see my fine new home?" "Your fine new home? Well, I hear that's nothing special. And I hear it's just another hole in the wall. And I am sure your party was quite dull." "You're just jealous because you do not have such a grand home." "I could have one if I wanted to." "Oh, you think so? Well then, let's see. I challenge you to build a home better than mine in half the time. 2 weeks' time. And I'll return to see your home. And when I do, I expect to see the best, grandest party ever. And if you can't provide all of these things that you've bragged about, I'm gonna be wearing a new hair fur coat come this wintertime." "I've really put my foot in my mouth this time," thought Hare. Then, because he was always such a tricky fellow, he came up with an idea. He visited all of his animal neighbors and asked them to help him build a new home. If they did, he promised these animal friends of his 2 wonderful gifts. Now, a lot of the animal friends didn't want to go out to this area to build a home for him for a few weeks because they would miss their families. And so Hare said, "Bring your families along with you." And so they did. All the animals who came built huts for their families and then went to work right away, building a great big home for Hare. And because so many animals had worked on the home, it was easily built within the 2 weeks' time. Which was a good thing because Hare was a little bit lazy. And all he did was pick up his drum and spend his time pounding out a beat while everyone worked. When Hyena returned, he found a home that looked a lot like his own. And so he asked Hare, what was it that made his home better? "What is it that makes your home better?" "Look around, can't you see? I don't just have a home here, I've got a whole village." This was Hare's first gift, the village, or an entire community. Now, Hyena had to admit that it was pretty nice to have a community of friends nearby. And then Hare invited everyone to the party. Because there were so many in the village, no one person had to cook the whole feast. Everybody brought the dish that they loved the best and that they made the best. And the food was truly as delicious as the food Hyena had served, if not even just a little bit better. But Hyena wanted to know exactly what made all of this stuff with the feast better from Hare. Hare said, "Just wait." And he began to tap out that rhythm on his drum. It was the same beat that he had used while all of his friends were working. And pretty soon, that beat from the drum started to make the animals dance. And then they began to sing. And Hare said, "This is my second gift to everyone. This is my second gift, my drum." Now, Hyena had to admit that the beat of the drum made the party so much better. With all of the music and the dancing and the eating, Hyena wanted to be mad but just couldn't because the party was so much fun. Some people say that the Hare presented 3 gifts. that day. The gift of the village, the gift of the drum, and the gift of the music. Now, a lot of people would argue that the drum and the music were the same thing. So many arguments between the animals about whether the drum and the music were two gifts or one. Hare never weighed in on that argument, but he sure did love to hear the animals talk about it.
Come, come, whoever you are. Come to this community, come to this time together, come into a moment of quiet, of prayer or meditation. Will you take a breath with me? My whole being changes when I take a breath on purpose. And when I imagine you taking a breath on purpose too. Come, come, whoever you are, and whatever you hold in your heart. I invite you to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. I invite you to send them to us at pastoralcare@uucava.org so that we might reach out to you. I invite you to simply notice them, to take a breath on purpose. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and beyond our naming, deep connection, however we feel you. Be with each one of us today. Help us to know we are not alone. Help us to know we are welcome. Help us to create welcome, true welcome, in this community, in this world. Help us to know we are beloved and to call each other beloved. Help us to create community. Spirit of life and love, Fuente de amor, move among us. Set us free. May it be so. Amen. This month, we are exploring the theme of beloved community. As we talked about how we might want to look at that theme over the course of the month, we decided that we wanted to start really with the historic roots. The phrase beloved community gets used frequently, and often we don't have a clear sense of where it came from or what it really means. And so that is this sermon. We're going to take a little trip through history and theology, a little bit of looking at the present and imagining the future. And we're going to start in the early 20th century with the philosopher Josiah Royce. Now, I have to warn you that this is actually the second time, what you're watching right now, the second time I have recorded this sermon. The first time this sermon came out at 32 minutes long, and I decided that might actually be longer than you wanted to hear about the historic roots of beloved community. So I'm going to try to move us through more quickly, but let me tell you, I have a lot to talk about here, and if you want to talk more about it, I hope you'll reach out to me and I can share my copious research with you. I'm indebted for that research to my colleagues Joanna Fontaine Crawford in Texas and Carl Gregg in Frederick, Maryland for the work that they've done, and to Bill Fogarty at UUCA for some of the work he's done, particularly around Howard Thurman and Thurman's work in beloved community. So here's where we are. Early 20th century. Despite the fact that we most often associate the term beloved community with Martin Luther King Jr., and indeed it was a term he used frequently, as we'll see, it actually originated with the philosopher Josiah Royce in early 20th century United States. Royce was friends with William James, who wrote The Varieties of Religious Experience. That might help locate him for you in your understanding of early 20th century theologians and philosophers in America, which obviously we all keep tabs on closely. Josiah Royce talked about the idea of beloved community as the goal, the best of everyone. These are Joanna Crawford's words. The best of everyone, working for the best of all humanity and encompassing all of humanity. Here are Royce's words about it. It is the enlargement of the ideal community of the loyal in the direction of identifying that community with all mankind. Loyalty was a core concept for Josiah Royce, and what he meant by it was, quote, the practically devoted love of an individual for a community. Loyalty wasn't about always, doing the thing that you were told. It was about that love for the community itself, for the ideal of the community. For Royce, as for King, we'll see later, beloved community was something that was both now and not yet, that could exist here even while it was a never fully met ideal. This goal of the best of all humanity, encompassing all of humanity, as Crawford puts it. The idea of the now and not yet connects Royce's work back several millennia, in fact, to the concept in the Hebrew Bible of the peaceable kingdom, and most particularly to the concept of the kingdom of God in the Christian Gospels, the now and not yet. For more conservative Christian theologians, the kingdom of God is often understood as sort of an eschatological future, what happens after the second coming of Jesus or after some great moment on earth. For more progressive Christian theologians, like those out of which Unitarian Universalism came, the kingdom of God is something we work toward. It's part of what's understood as the social gospel, the good news that we build with each other. That's how Josiah Royce understood beloved community. And it's how Reverend Dr. King understood it as well. Working a little bit after Josiah Royce, although also simultaneously, we have Martin Luther King and his work on beloved community, which he located right within the civil rights struggle that was so much a part of his life, as well as within his struggles for peace, for justice, for work against materialism, and for equitable, peaceful, and compassionate society. For Dr. King, beloved community was rooted in agape love. Carl Gregg, my colleague in Frederick, Maryland, writes, for King, building beloved community requires the hard work of reconciliation, redemption, and being in right relationship, of, quote, transforming opponents into friends, King's words. King believed agape love was the heart of beloved community, and indeed of all of his work. Love is often described, particularly in Greek philosophy, as having three types: eros, or romantic love; philos, or brotherly love, familial love; and then agape. For King, agape love was the love that God has for humans, humans have for God, and that humans have for each other in the grandest sense. The love that touches the divine. Rooted in that agape love, we are called to build beloved community. But for King, just as for Royce, beloved community is both not yet and now, something that we work for all the time. The King Center says, for Dr. King, the beloved community was not a lofty utopian goal to be confused with the rapturous image of the peaceable kingdom in which lions and lambs coexist in idyllic harmony. Rather, the beloved community was for him a realistic, achievable goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. This beloved community of kings is something any one of us can work toward, and in fact must work toward, compelled by the theological depth of agape love. I think it is this beloved community, King's beloved community, that shows up in the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism. As many of you know, UUCA is part of a national movement working to bring the 8th principle to all of Unitarian Universalism so that it might be voted on not just by individual congregations, as it has been here, but by the congregations and the association of congregations writ large, part of what we value at our core as Unitarian Universalists. The 8th principle reads that it invites us to do this work, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I think we see in that both the agape love, the spiritual wholeness, the deep resonance theologically of King's work, and also the work toward it every day, the actions, accountable actions to dismantle racism, what it means to build beloved community here and now. Okay, so if we root beloved community in Royce's concept and in King's work, where do we engage with it in this moment? What does it look like in a congregational setting, perhaps, to work toward beloved community? Not just within our walls, but within the world itself, that all of humanity that Royce imagined. Here's where Howard Thurman comes in. Thurman actually had a chance to work toward beloved community in a congregational setting as he co-founded the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples in San Francisco. Founded in 1944 as the country's first interfaith and interracial congregation, the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples was an experiment of kind, still existing today. In reflecting on that work, Thurman, another 20th century theologian and co-thinker with Dr. King, wrote, "A way could be found to unite people of great ideological and religious diversity through experiences which were more compelling than the concepts that separated and divided us." I think that we hear in Thurman's words there a resonance with Royce's idea of the loyalty toward this community ideal. That when people who are different from each other are brought together by a larger mission, a mission that is for the ideal community, the beloved community, they are able to transcend those differences. But not to transcend them in a way that imagines sameness or kind of easy breezy utopia. Thurman speaks to that specifically. "The term beloved community," wrote Thurman, "has a soft and sentimental ring. It conjures an image of tranquility, peace, and the utter absence of struggle and all things that irritate and disturb. But my thought is far from such a utopian surmise. Disagreements will be real and germane to the vast undertaking of man's becoming at home in his work and under the eaves of his brother's house." Thurman's understanding of beloved community, like Dr. King's, wasn't one where everything was perfect and peaceful, unless we mean the deeper peace that comes when justice and equity, when struggle through difference arrives at the point of community building. Marcia Riggs, a womanist theologian and ethicist at Columbia Theological Seminary, adds to our understanding of what this might look like. She writes, "My contention is that we do not have adequate images for beloved community in the 21st century. Our images for envisioning multicultural society, such as salad bowl or mosaic, are certainly an improvement over the melting point image that stressed assimilation and colorblind society. I contend that we must grapple for new images for a 21st century understanding of what beloved community is to begin practicing it, end quote. Riggs draws on the work of Bell Hooks, Black feminist author of Killing Rage, Ending Racism, in which Hooks writes, "Beloved community is formed not by the eradication of difference, but by its affirmation, by each of us claiming the identities and cultural legacies that shape who we are and how we live in the world." In other words, beloved community isn't about coming to some place where things are fine because we're all the same, but rather it's about articulating and honoring the different identities each one of us hold, bringing them in our fullness, creating a space where they can be seen fully. Our racial and ethnic identity, whether we identify as queer, what it means to us to be a person, must be held fully within the community that we create. Now, here I think is the paradox for those of us who are seeking to create beloved community in a real lived sense. Let's say within the congregation and then moving out into the world. Because even as we seek to create a community where our identities and individualities are fully experienced and honored, where we bring curiosity and awe to the differences that we have between us, we need to be certain not to fall into what my colleague Fred Muir, emeritus minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Annapolis, calls the heresy of individualism, rampant within Unitarian Universalism, and I would say, and surely have said already before in other sermons, within white American society in particular. Individualism tells us that our particular need and want, if we have the privilege, the means to be able to get it, can be fulfilled at any moment, exactly the way we like it. Years ago, I read a book, a little tiny book by Alpesh Bhatt, written actually for kind of corporate thinkers for the business world, called The Triple Soy Decaf Latte Era. The triple soy decaf latte era describes the world that we live in, where if you have the means, you can go and get your coffee exactly the way you like it. Caramel macchiato, a lot of caramel, just a little bit of cinnamon, and if it's made wrong, you can bring it back and say, do it again. Beloved community, congregational life, period, is the opposite of Starbucks, or should be. It's an urn of coffee that you didn't make and isn't really done the way you like it and might even be lukewarm by the time you get to it. But it's an urn of coffee that we share together. It's the sharing that's important. So somehow, in this paradox of beloved community, the kind of beloved community that Thurman and King and Riggs and Royce are calling us to, we need to hold both the appreciation of difference, of individuality in identity, and work against the heresy, the sin even, of individualism, where what I want is most important, more important than what the community itself needs, than the vision and ideal of community together. That both and work is hard, to hold the duality of how we seek to be together. And it is worth it. And I think we can practice that work all the time. Because beloved community is so associated with the civil rights era, with anti-racism work, and the dream of multiracial community, I think sometimes, particularly we who identify as white, understand or believe that we can only practice that we can only build our beloved community muscles when we're actively involved in multiracial community. that we need to have racial difference in order to practice the muscles that would enable us to work against racism, if that makes sense. Stick with me. My thinking on this was affected several years ago when I came across a book by Louise Derman Sparks, written actually for educators, called What If All the Kids Are White? It posits that even in a classroom of entirely white children, a teacher can and in fact must teach for multiracial community, teach the practices that enable people who identify as white to live in multiracial community, to work against racism, to be able to see racism even, to honor difference and fight for anti-racism, and build the kind of world that we seek. Derman Sparks was writing specifically in response to educators that said to her, white educators that said to her, I can't really teach multiracial community. I can't teach anti-racism because all the kids in my class are white. In the book, she talks about how to build the muscles all the time that will help those of us who identify as white to be able to do anti-racism work and ultimately to function in multiracial community and multiracial society. The reality is that many or most people of color have built those muscles already to navigate multiracial society because of the reality of America and the supremacy of white culture within American society. Those of us who are white have to choose to build those muscles. And what I contend is that we can practice, we can build those muscles in all kinds of situations, in our congregational life or any other part of our life. We can build those muscles anytime we fight against the Starbucks ethos and instead move toward the coffee urn ethos. The idea that the we is important in community, that it isn't just about what I want, but about what we need. And we can build those muscles every time we build our capacity to be curious about, to acknowledge, to notice, and to be awed by and amazed by difference in identity, in perspective, in cultural experience. Now, this congregation, I want to be clear, is not a white congregation. It is a historically white congregation. It is a majority white congregation. And of course, it has people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color throughout the congregation. It has been served by ministers of color, by lay leaders and board members of color. And it remains a majority white congregation. And so those of us who are white within this congregation know that we have a lot of muscle building to do to be able to create the beloved community, the multiracial community, the community of both freedom and equality that King imagined, that Royce imagined, that Thurman imagined, that Riggs imagines. Freedom and equality, both of these are necessary. In an article titled Beloved Community, Martin Luther King, Howard Thurman, and Josiah Royce by Kipton Jensen and Preston King of Morehouse College, Jensen and King write, though freedom and equality are often deployed as mutually antipathetic or opposite, King saw the two as mutually supportive. For King, freedom in abstraction from equality was vain, absurd, unthinkable. Freedom for him was sustained by community, not denied by community, nurtured in community, but sunk in nullity taken on its own. What he embraced in particular was beloved community, which was a society of friends, a colloquy of equals, a practice of concern, caring, and giving, in which each person had standing, each stone in place, none rejected, in a rising tumult of aspiring mutuality. A rising tumult of aspiring mutuality. Not sweet and sentimental, not easy peasy peaceful, but rather a place where we bring the fullness of our identity and where we fight against the individualism toward the needs of the community as a whole. That's the beloved community, rooted in history, living and possible in the present if we work toward it, if we build our muscles. I'm going to stop there because otherwise we'll be right back at 32 minutes and I'll have lost everybody. But I hope that you look for ways to build those muscles, that you look for ways to build beloved community here and now and not yet. You can reach out to me or to Reverend Walter to hear more about our anti-racism work, both through Faith 360 classes, through conferences with other Unitarian Universalist congregations and interfaith congregations, through the work of our social justice groups and the Eighth Principle team. Even coming up next weekend, there's an opportunity to look at how the beloved community work of the Eighth Principle weaves into all of our social justice work. Let us keep building those muscles, all of us together, because it will take every single one of us in our own identity and power, building and creating community with each other. And friends, it will be worth it to have that community where justice rolls down, where freedom and equality are held together, where individuality and not individualism takes the day, where we create beloved community together. May it be so.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society, and it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise men said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down. They can kill the profit, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you carry me, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
UUCA is a congregation invested in building the beloved community here within these virtual walls and out in the world. Even in these challenging times, UUCA continues to be a force of love and justice and a welcoming home for all seeking our spiritual community. You can help sustain our beloved community by supporting UUCA with your financial gifts. To give today, you can mail a check payable to UUCA with the word offering or pledge in the memo line. You can give online at the church website, uucava.org, and just click on the donate button at the top of the page. Or you can donate by text. You can donate by using the mobile app Give Plus. Just enter the zip code 22204 and choose our church, UUCA, and follow the prompts to give now. Our offertory prayer reminds us, let us be grateful. When we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
When we trust the wind.
When our heart is in a holy place, perhaps that is agape love. May you feel it in your heart, and may that love lead you to practice building muscles to create the beloved community, now and not yet. The beloved community of King, of Royce, of Thurman, of Riggs, of Hooks. The beloved community that could be ours.